Beyond the Gate spoilers tease that Andre had missed his last chance to confess to Danny. For weeks, he had carried that knot of unspoken truth in his chest like a weight that pressed harder every time Danny smiled at him, every time she asked if he was all right. He'd rehearsed the words in his head, the simple, honest confession that might have cleared the air between them before everything spiraled out of control. But when the moment came, when she was right there in front of him, eyes curious and open, Andre hesitated. He had decided painfully, reluctantly, that it was better to break things off with her than to let the truth fester and destroy them later. The decision didn't come easily. He had spent nights staring at the ceiling, trying to convince himself that ending it was the merciful thing, that sometimes the kindest act was to walk away before you caused deeper harm. But fate, as if mocking his attempt at control, chose that moment to intervene. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, Danny's phone lit up with a message from Bill. The change in her face was instant. Her brow furrowed, her lips parted in a soft gasp, and her hand trembled as she scrolled through the words. Whatever was in that message drained the warmth from her expression. Without explanation, she looked at Andre and whispered, "Bill, he needs me." "Something's happened." Before he could respond, she leaned forward. It was quick, almost instinctive, a goodbye kiss pressed to his lips. It wasn't the kind of kiss lovers share when they're full of passion, but something bittersweet, a seal on a moment that neither of them understood fully. Then she was gone, running down the hall toward Bill's apartment, leaving Andre standing there with his unspoken truth hanging in the air. And that was the precise moment Ashley arrived, just in time to see Danny's hands on Andre, to see the kiss she could only interpret one way. Her heart jolted, first confusion, then anger, then a sharp, cold hurt. She didn't wait for explanations. She turned on her heel, walking away before Andre even realized she'd been there. When Ashley finally made it home, she tried to keep her face neutral, but Jan, her mother, had known her too long to miss the signs. Ashley's steps were heavy, her shoulders tense, and she barely touched her dinner. Jan watched her for a while, then set down her fork and spoke softly, "Honey, something's wrong. Talk to me." At first, Ashley resisted. She didn't want to give voice to what she'd seen, as if saying it out loud would make it more real. But Jan was patient. She moved to sit beside her daughter, hand resting gently on her arm. "You know you can tell me anything," she said. Finally, Ashley let it spill. "I saw him, Mom. Andre. With Danny." She kissed him. Jan's eyes narrowed slightly, not in surprise, but in a quiet confirmation of something she had suspected. "Ashley, I have to tell you something. This isn't the first time I've worried about Andre's intentions. I once saw him flirting with another woman, in a way no man committed to someone should." Ashley's throat tightened. She had brushed off her mother's subtle warnings before, telling herself that Jan was being overprotective. But now it was harder to deny. "I think," Jan continued carefully, "you need to ask yourself whether Andre is truly the man for you. Sometimes, we stay with someone because we're afraid of being alone, but that fear keeps us from finding someone who's safe, steady, and truly respects us." There was a pause, one that felt heavier than the rest. Jan's gaze softened. "Derek, for instance. He's a good man. Reliable. He's always respected you. Maybe you should give him a chance." Ashley looked at her mother sharply. She could hear the subtext in every word. Jan didn't just think Andre was wrong for her, she thought Derek was right. And Derek had always been there, somewhere on the edges of her life. A friend, sometimes more than that, but always careful not to cross a line. That night, Ashley lay in bed turning her mother's words over in her mind. She didn't want to admit that Jan might be right. It felt like betrayal to even imagine replacing Andre with someone else. But the image of Danny leaning toward him wouldn't fade, no matter how she tried to dismiss it. The next morning, Andre tried everything to get Ashley to talk to him. He texted. He called. He even waited by her usual coffee spot. When they finally crossed paths, she listened, but her responses were short, her eyes distant. Every time he tried to explain, she redirected the conversation. Then came the moment that hit him hardest. She glanced at her phone, smiled faintly, and said, "I have an appointment soon." A car pulled up at the curb, and Andre saw Derek step out, leaning casually against the door. Ashley's face lit up, not in the way it used to for Andre, but enough to twist something in his chest. She walked toward Derek, and the two of them laughed at something he said before getting in the car. Andre stood frozen. There was a hollowness in his stomach, as though the ground had shifted under him. Meanwhile, Jan's role in this quiet rearrangement of lives became clear. No mother wants to see her daughter hurt, and Jan believed she was protecting Ashley by nudging her toward Derek. She wasted no time letting Derek know subtly but effectively that Ashley and Andre were finished. It wasn't malicious, at least not in Jan's mind, it was strategic. "If you really care for her," she told him in a carefully worded message, "now's the time." Derek, who had kept his distance for years out of respect for Ashley's relationships, didn't need more encouragement. He showed up with flowers, with the easy charm of a man who knows he's finally been granted permission to step forward. When he asked Ashley to dinner, she didn't say no. Yet, beneath the polite acceptance, Ashley's heart was tangled. The betrayal she felt from Andre still ached, a wound that hadn't even begun to scab over. And there was another shadow creeping into her thought, one she hadn't dared to share with anyone. She remembered the nights with Andre, the intimacy they'd shared, and a cold knot of fear tightened in her stomach. What if she was pregnant? The idea terrified her, not just because of what it would mean for her future, but because she didn't know how Derek would react. Would he see it as a deal-breaker? Would the fragile beginnings of their relationship crumble under the weight of a child that wasn't his? And then there was Andre. For all the anger she felt toward him, for all the mistrust, she couldn't shake the thought of how he might respond if he knew. Would he demand she end the pregnancy? Or would he, against all odds, want to be part of the child's life? Every scenario played out in her mind like an endless film reel, each one more complicated than the last. Even as she smiled politely at Derek across the dinner table, her mind was miles away, spiraling into possibilities she couldn't control. Andre, meanwhile, was unraveling. He could sense that Ashley was slipping further from him with every passing hour. The fact that Derek was now a constant presence only fueled his desperation. He replayed his last moments with Danny over and over, cursing himself for letting her leave without explanation, for letting Ashley walk away without chasing after her that night. But the truth was, the damage might already be beyond repair. And somewhere deep down, Andre feared that what lay beyond the gates of this tangled situation wasn't redemption, but something far darker. Ashley had always thought of Derek as safe, in the way a quiet harbor is safe after a storm. He was predictable, polite, and never asked for more than she was willing to give. That night, sitting across from him at the small Italian place near the park, she tried to focus on the ease of his company, the way he made conversation without pressing too deep, the way he let silences settle comfortably between them. But even as Derek talked about his work, about a funny mishap with a delivery truck and a client's overexcited dog, Ashley's mind kept drifting. Every glance at the flicker of the candle on their table brought back flashes of Andre's face, the raw, unguarded look he'd had when she told him she was busy, the way his eyes followed her as she left with Derek. She hated that a part of her still cared how Andre felt. When Derek walked her back to her apartment, his hand brushed hers. He didn't push for more, just smiled and said, "I had a good time tonight. We should do it again." Ashley nodded, returning the smile, but as she shut her door behind her, her breath left in a shaky sigh. Jan was in the kitchen, sipping tea. She looked up as Ashley entered, her eyes scanning for clues. "How was it?" she asked casually. "It was fine," Ashley said, and left it at that. Jan didn't press. She'd planted the seed she wanted to plant. Now she would give it time to grow. But she watched her daughter closely, noting the faint crease between her brows, the way she lingered by the window as though expecting to see someone standing outside. Across town, Andre sat in his car, parked on a side street near Ashley's building. He knew it was pathetic. He told himself he just wanted to see her, to get a sense of whether she was truly moving on. But the truth was uglier. He couldn't let go. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles whitened, replaying the sight of her walking beside Derek, laughing. His phone buzzed. A message from Danny. Bill's not doing well. I'm staying with him tonight. Andre stared at it for a long time. Bill. Always Bill. He knew Danny's loyalty to her friend was genuine, but there was something in the way she said his name, something in the way she dropped everything for him, that made Andre's chest tighten with a different kind of jealousy. Meanwhile, Bill was in his apartment, the air heavy with the scent of whiskey. Danny sat beside him on the couch, her hand resting on his arm. He'd just told her about the bad news of family loss that had knocked the breath out of him. She didn't try to offer hollow reassurances. Instead, she simply stayed, her presence a quiet anchor. Bill looked at her, really looked, and in that moment, something shifted between them. Danny didn't notice her, maybe she pretended not to, but Bill felt it. A thread, thin but unbreakable, had been tied. Back in her room, Ashley lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The thought she'd been avoiding all day finally forced its way to the front of her mind, the possibility of pregnancy. She counted days in her head, her stomach tightening with each calculation. It was too soon to be certain, but the uncertainty itself was a weight she could barely carry. She imagined Derek's reaction if she told him. His face, usually calm and pleasant, would harden. Maybe he'd walk away without a word. Maybe he'd try to force a smile, say they could make it work, but deep down resent her for it. And Andre, she couldn't even guess. He might see it as a reason to fight for her again, or he might take it as one more complication he didn't want. Jan's voice echoed in her mind, choose someone safe. But safety felt like a foreign country now, distant, unreachable. Over the next week, the web between them all grew tighter. Andre made several attempts to corner Ashley for a real conversation, but she evaded each one. Derek, sensing the ground beneath him was still fragile, doubled his efforts, small gestures, thoughtful messages, showing up with coffee in the mornings. Jan approved of every move, quietly reinforcing his presence. Danny, caught between her own unresolved feelings for Andre and her commitment to helping Bill, found herself drifting further from Andre without even realizing it. Bill relied on her more each day, and she let him. Part of her knew that the comfort she offered him was blurring into something more, something neither of them had named yet. Then, one rainy evening, it happened. Ashley was walking home from the grocery store, umbrella bending against the wind, when she spotted Andre standing by her building's entrance. He was soaked through, his jacket clinging to him, hair plastered to his forehead. Ashley, he said, stepping forward. Please. Just give me 5 minutes. She hesitated, water dripping from her umbrella, heart thudding. Finally, she nodded and followed him under the small awning by the door. I need you to know, Andre began, what you saw with Danny, it wasn't what it looked like. She kissed me goodbye because she was leaving to help Bill. That's all. I was about to, he stopped, the words catching in his throat. About to what? Ashley asked, her voice tight. About to tell her something important. Something that doesn't even matter now because he broke off, glancing away. Because I messed everything up with you. Ashley's grip on the umbrella tightened. You're right about one thing, she said. It doesn't matter now. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, and the name flashing on the screen was Derek. She didn't answer, but she knew Andre saw it. His shoulders slumped, a defeated look crossing his face. Goodbye, Andre, she said softly, and walked inside without looking back. Andre stood there until the rain blurred everything: a street, the windows, the outlines of people passing by. In the days that followed, Derek became more than just a safe choice for Ashley. He became a shield. She let him into her routines, into the spaces Andre used to occupy. But the fear inside her didn't fade. She bought a test, hiding it deep in a drawer, waiting for the right moment to face the truth. Jan noticed the shift in her daughter, the way she seemed lighter around Derek, but also distracted. She guessed there was more going on than Ashley was saying, but for now, she kept her observations to herself. One night, Danny came by to see Ashley under the pretense of checking in. But the conversation quickly turned personal. Danny mentioned Andre briefly, carefully, and Ashley's reaction was sharper than she intended. Danny read the room and didn't push, but as she left, she couldn't help wondering if the tangle of hurt between them all was something that could ever be undone. And somewhere across the city, Andre sat alone in his apartment, phone in hand, staring at a message he'd typed and deleted half a dozen times. The words were simple: "If you're pregnant, I want to be there." But he didn't know if sending it would make him a man trying to take responsibility or just another weight dragging her down. Outside, the night pressed close, and the gates, whatever they truly were, stood just ahead, waiting for someone to step through. Ashley woke before sunrise, the apartment still heavy with the quiet of unspoken things. The unopened pregnancy test lay in the drawer beside her bed like a coiled snake, silent but waiting. She told herself she'd deal with it later, after coffee, after she'd found the courage to face whatever truth it would reveal. But life didn't give her that luxury. Her phone rang, a call from Danny. The sound made her stomach twist. For a moment she considered letting it go to voicemail, but something in the urgency of Danny's name flashing on the screen made her answer. "Ashley, it's Bill," Danny said without preamble. He's in the hospital. I'm here with him, but I thought you should know." Ashley blinked, caught off guard. "Why would I?" "Because Andre's here too." Danny's voice faltered. "And he's not taking it well." Ashley's chest tightened. Part of her wanted to hang up, to keep her distance from whatever storm was brewing between them. But another part, a quieter, persistent part, knew she couldn't. She arrived at the hospital less than an hour later. The air in the waiting area felt thick, the kind that clung to your skin. Danny sat in one of the chairs, hair pulled back, eyes tired but sharp. Across from her, Andre leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. When he looked up and saw Ashley, something flickered in his eye, relief, maybe, or desperation. But she didn't go to him. She stood near Danny instead, arms crossed. "How is he?" Ashley asked. "They think it's stress-related," Danny said quietly. "He's stable, but it scared him." Andre's voice cut in, low but firm. "Bill's been under pressure for months. He wouldn't tell anyone, but it's been eating at him. I should have noticed sooner." Ashley caught the edge in his tone. This wasn't just guilt, it was something deeper, a connection between him and Bill she hadn't understood before. Derek arrived a few minutes later, carrying a paper bag with sandwiches. He greeted Ashley with a soft smile and kissed her cheek, his eyes briefly scanning Andre before settling back on her. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said, as if Andre weren't even in the room. The tension was palpable. Danny shifted in her seat, her gaze moving between the three of them like she was calculating the safest way to break up a fight that hadn't started yet. It was Andre who broke the silence. "Ashley, can we talk?" "Just for a minute." She hesitated, but Derek's hand on her arm made the choice for her. "You don't have to," he said gently. "I know," she replied, and stepped toward Andre anyway. They walked a short distance down the hall, away from the others. Andre's voice was quiet, but there was an urgency in it. "I need to know if you're pregnant." Her breath caught. "That's not your business anymore." "It is if it's mine," he said, eyes locking on hers. "And I'm not asking so I can run from it. I'm asking because if you are, I want to be here for you. For both of you." Ashley searched his face for signs of the man she'd trusted before everything fell apart. There was no arrogance there, no pleading, just a steady, almost painful sincerity. Before she could answer, Danny appeared at the end of the hall. "Bill's asking for you, Andre." He glanced at Ashley once more, then followed Danny back. Ashley stayed rooted in place, her mind spinning. Later that afternoon, Bill was discharged with strict instructions to rest. Danny took him home, fussing over him in a way that made Andre strangely quiet. Derek offered to drive Ashley back, and she accepted, though her thoughts were still somewhere in that hospital corridor. That night, the choice she'd been avoiding could no longer wait. Ashley sat on the edge of her bed, the pregnancy test clutched in her hand. When the result appeared, her heart thudded so loudly she was sure the neighbors could hear it. She didn't sleep. By morning, she'd made a decision not about Derek or Andre, but about herself. She called Andre first. When he answered, she said, "I'm pregnant." There was no tremor in her voice. He was silent for a long moment. Then, softly, "Thank you for telling me." "I'm not asking you to fix it," she said. "I just thought you should know." "I want to be part of this," he replied. "Whatever you decide, I'm here." Her throat tightened, but she didn't answer right away. Later, she told Derek. His reaction was exactly what she'd feared, a flicker of shock, quickly masked by a careful expression. "I need some time to think," he said. Jan, upon hearing the news, tried to hide her disappointment. She hugged her daughter tightly, murmuring that they would figure it out, but Ashley could feel the shift in her mother's carefully laid plans. In the end, the gates everyone had been circling weren't made of iron or wood, they were choices, looming and inevitable. Danny, still bound to Bill by a loyalty that was deepening into love, watched Andre from a distance, knowing their paths were diverging. Andre, standing on the threshold of a life he hadn't planned, waited to see if Ashley would let him in again. Derek, faced with the reality of loving someone carrying another man's child, weighed whether safety was worth the risk of heartbreak. And Ashley, tired, scared, but clearer than she'd been in months, realized that stepping through those gates would be her decision alone. When she finally made it, it wasn't with a grand gesture or a tearful reunion. It was with quiet certainty, the kind that comes when you stop running from the truth. Whatever waited on the other side, she knew she'd face it on her own terms.